Hi everyone, we're just doing a tiny little bonus episode. Jess is a little bit under the weather, so I've hauled CJ for a special little discussion. We're actually just going to talk about like us getting into tabletop and LARP in general, just as a little amuse-bouche, just a little tiny soundbite for you, just to break up the other episodes. So, hi CJ.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm good. We've just had a lovely discussion before this, but we're like, we have to record this, otherwise we're just going to keep talking for 4 hours. And I was like, fine.
Which was great.
Yep. Yeah, it was lovely.
However, sometimes you got to hit the record button.
Exactly. We got this podcast thing that's getting in the way of it. So yeah, we've got to really do that. I want to kind of like let people know how you and I met, and then we can kind of springboard into what we kind of know about TTRPGs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And LARPs. So you and I met at a LARP, which was commercially disparate from Hobbits and Lord of the Rings.
Yes, legally distinct Hobbit LARP.
A legally distinct Hobbit LARP, which was the brainchild of Kitty Dobson, where she just went, hey, this is during the first couple of lockdowns. Wouldn't it be fun if we played a little halfling LARP and we just had a fun time and no big threats happened?
Mm-hmm. Second Breakfast is the name of this LARP. I do think they intend to run it again, and if you just want a fun time with low stakes and in my experience a lot of home cooked over the fire food, do it. It's worth it.
I have never eaten so well at a LARP.
I know. Someone made cheese. I genuinely walked around, and we had brought some food with us, but it was provided to us at every point. I once had a man who had the most incredible mutton chops just come to me with a dried sausage, break off a bit of this sausage, and just hand it to me. And I was like, this is what it's like to live in a Ghibli film. Yes.
Like,
or I suppose in like Hobbiton.
Yes.
So no, it was beautiful.
You were running the tavern in, I want to say, Upper Frogmore?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I was the tavern keeper for Upper Frogmore. I had lots of mead on hand and a few other things, but mostly mead. Oh, ciders. I had ciders as well. You
did have a lot of ciders. And it was, so for those of you who haven't been to the iLab site, go, because it is like it's literally player made. They do a lot of airsoft for some parts of the year, but people come for the weekends and they do build weekends. And so there's a Wild West town, there's a Viking town, and there's spaces all between. And these are people, either the showrunners or like people who come up for the build weekends, make their own things. And so you've got this amazing patchwork of differently made buildings, and it feels very real. I mean, I know the rule is they can't have, it can't be a fully permanent building, but they're all like sheds that are leaning to a little bit. It's all very lived in. And so the tavern is a really nice organic space, and you were constantly either had food or were making food, and then your dog was there. And so just this little dog's just running in and out. And I was like, I don't need to pretend. There's no immersion here. I am actually in a Hobbit town. It was incredible.
It was just, and it was so refreshing because for me, I haven't played a lot of, I don't want to, I don't want this to sound negative. It's very positive. I haven't played a lot of LARPs that are just silly.
Yes.
And it was so refreshing and exactly what was needed at the time.
I think it was so silly and tongue-in-cheek. You could allow people to be very serious about very silly things.
Yes, which we were.
And it basically like culminated in us at the end of the thing going, oh, great, how far have you got to go back? And they're like, oh, we've got to go back to East Anglia. And I was like, well, where in East Anglia? So we narrowed it down, and then we were like, we live in the same goddamn town.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe...
It got weirder.
Listeners. It got weirder. Because you live in the building that me and my partner used to live in, like a couple of steps down. So we were on the same street, and we were like, okay, this is weird. And I was like, and I was talking to CJ's partner, and I was like, you're familiar.
Incredibly familiar, but completely removed from any prior context. So took a week or two, I think.
We both kind of looked at each other and went, you're vaguely familiar. And for those of you who haven't actually seen me, I no longer have hair on my head, and I now have a beard. So I'm the iron filings man, and I've just rotated my hair to different degrees. And CJ's partner hadn't seen me do this. So understandably went, hang on. So then we realized we'd actually been to university together. We're like, oh my God, this is amazing.
In the same or similar program as well.
Yeah.
Like just...
We'd spent a week together scuba diving in Egypt. So we were like, oh, yeah. I remember that time that we spent like a whole week together. Yeah, okay. That checks out.
Yep. And so we met at a LARP in, I guess, South England is a good generic way to describe the area. We both live in East Anglia. We moved into our place only a couple of months after they moved out of their place, which was the same like overarching building. It's and those two went to uni together. Was this up north as well?
Yeah, this is up in Cumbria, so this is like not even the same region.
Yeah, and those two went to uni together in Cumbria. I don't know how any of this happened. And the magic of LARP.
And then me and my partner were at your house and we were having a lovely discussion. We were playing Quacks, which we played recently, and I won. So
well done.
Thank you very much for training me up for that one. So we were doing that, and I was like, oh, CJ's got a lot of like RPG stuff. I better ask them about some of it. And then you're like, yeah, okay. And then I check, and then you're like, oh yeah, no, I do some streaming. And then I like check your link tree, and you're like, I've written for this, I've done this, I'm on this stream. And I was like, okay, a little bit more than, because I was there like, it'd be good to introduce CJ to like some RPGs or something. And then you were there like, I have some experience. I played more and different variants of games. And I'm like, okay, cool.
I think it's twofold for me. One, I've been doing a lot of this just sometimes for so long that I have a lot of times, I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't feel immodest, but I have a lot of times where people are like, you've done really cool things, and I'm like, have I? And it's not that I'm not actively excited about the things when I'm doing them. I think there's just a base misunderstanding in my brain that if I'm doing it, it must not be that cool.
You're on some really incredible projects, and you're streaming it usually at times where I'm asleep, which is not hard because I sleep, if I could get away with it, about 14 hours a day. So that's
I would. Sometimes I do.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the input from Teddy.
Thank you, Teddles.
Thank you, Teddy.
But you've played such a great variance of games, and then when I like click onto your streams, I'm like, wow. And like the groups you're with are like really diverse and interesting casts. I'm like, wow, oh my gosh. And then I was talking to my friend Jess, and I was like, Jess, in fact, I remember doing this in the nerdiest way, which I do everything, which is I write a very formally worded email and invite people to do things.
It was beautiful. It was absolute. It was really sweet because I got it and it was awesome and I was really glad and it felt professional. It felt nice. But I was like, I said, I'm really glad and this is a great email. I'm really happy. And I was talking to my partner and then I chuckled and I was like, but like, we're friends. What a dork. He could have just asked.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it was perfect and brilliant and a very Sam thing to do, and I'm very happy that it was done that way.
Thank you very much.
It did give me a chuckle though, because I was like, could have just sent a WhatsApp message, and I would have been like, cool. But it was awesome. It felt very official. I've had very, very official things done less officially than that. So.
Yeah, I got it. Must be like my corporate like trauma, just like hanging in there. Like you must word an email, say it very nicely, state your intention at in the first point, then elaborate, and then close it off, and then say nice thank you.
Lucy's getting really good at it, but basically anytime she's ever had to write a serious email, she filters it through me first for the same reason. It's probably corporate trauma TM.
Yeah. My partner keeps going like, is this email good? I'm like, remove this. I feel like I do like the thing on TikTok where people pretend they have like a male assistant and they just like strip out some of the language. I'm like, you don't need to do this. No one needs that. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to add most of that back in. But thank you very much for the critical. I was like, you're welcome. My job's done here.
I'm so pedantic, and I'm not a grammar checker for like other people, right? Like I'm not like, oh, they should have written. No, I don't give a crap. But when it comes to either something I'm being asked to go through, or I'm writing myself, I'm so horribly pedantic. I'm like, you've started this sentence with this, and then 3 sentences later you started this sentence with this again. So you might want to diversify your, vocabulary a little bit here, so that it doesn't, it doesn't interrupt the flow. And it's just like, who cares? It's an email. It's an email someone's going to read once. What are you doing? But I've done a lot of editing and copywriting, and even before that, I had several different positions where one of the jobs expected of me was to write the professional emails and the professional letters. And so I think it's just ingrained in me at this point.
Yeah, I definitely get a lot of that. So kind of like going back to the earlier stuff, what's your first stepping on point for, I'm not going to say LARP or TTRPGs as the first initiatives, but like creative play that's not, I'm a kid and I'm playing pretend, where you're like, there's a system here. What's going on? What was your touching point?
So, always had the D&D books around. Both my brother played a little bit, although he was he has over his life sometimes struggled to find a group. So for him, I think he's had more of an academic or intellectual interest in TTRPGs. He has a great understanding of them, and I feel really fortunate that I've been able to bring him into a group recently, because he hasn't been able to have that experience as much, and I think he's loving it. I don't want to speak for him, but I think he's having a great time. He's also developing his own tabletop role-playing game right now. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't know, maybe we'll even have him on to talk about it once it's published. But I'm very excited for him. So I feel like I was always kind of exposed to it lightly. And then when I was 11, I can't remember if we were in like advanced or second. I think this was right after 3.0 came out, if I remember correctly. If I remember correctly, we were in 3rd edition D&D, but it was I at least started before 3.5 rolled out, which I know that 3.5 became the standard 3rd edition pretty much through 4th edition for many people who were not particularly impressed by 4th edition until 5th came around. So, but I do think that I initially started in 3rd edition. I had exposure to AD&D, basic, all of that. I had exposure, but I didn't have a lot of experience. I mean, we have a cabinet of like original D&D stuff in this house. A lot of which was kind of inherited from my half brother, but I think my brother has taken possession of it. Darn it!
See if you can steal any, so I can take a read.
Just that's a. But it is what it is. But it's fine. I'll ask him to deed it to me in his will. That being said, when I was 11, a friend of mine, who was actually the same friend who got me into anime. This friend was very cultured in the nerd ways. She's awesome. I have not spoken to her in a long time, not from any falling out. Unfortunately, when we both went away to uni, it just sort of, did as many friendships do, unfortunately. But she's just a really cool person overall. She's still a cool person. I think we followed each other on Instagram for a while. But at the time, I thought she was really cool. She had a lot of exposure to like anime and stuff at a time where not a lot of people did, because she was half Japanese. And she introduced us to, she was like, well, you like Sailor Moon on Cartoon Network, so like let's watch some other stuff. So I got into anime a little bit then. I got really strongly into anime after I studied abroad in Japan, but that's a story for another time. But I was exposed to it and enjoyed it as, a preteen and teen. But at around that same year, her father, who is probably objectively like super freaking cool because he was the one who introduced her to anime and introduced her to D&D.
The credentials are all checking out, yeah.
Yep. And so objectively very cool man had, her father had been into D&D at some point. And so she'd learned about it. And so she said, I want to start a campaign. And so she and a group of us, and what this is absolutely wild, in like roughly 2001.
Yeah.
We were all assigned female at birth.
Hmm.
And actually, I think I'm the only person who doesn't still identify. It was a group of 5 of us started playing D&D. We were 11 years old. I think there's a lot of reasons we did. It just seemed cool was one thing. It was also a natural transition because we were getting to an age where like we were still playing pretend, but it's cultural...
cooler when it's got rules.
Right. The kind of cultural pressure to stop playing pretend does start to happen to you around that age. And so it was a natural transition for us. I still to this day have hilarious stories. She was a very strict GM in certain ways. For an 11-year-old, that's wild. But if you think about I have another friend like this that has certain views about tabletop and stuff, but when you realize that his father played back in the 80s, then suddenly it starts to make sense. Just because culturally there was less, roleplay is still a big part of it even then, but there was more of a gamified aspect to it that we still use, but we've softened a little at our tables in favor of roleplay nowadays. So she had a table that she would roll on to punish us if we weren't paying attention.
Oh my gosh.
If we ever spoke out of character...
Yeah.
Like, we had, like, a visual... I think we put our hand on our head when we spoke out of character or whatever, but if we needed to talk out of character, I think we were at a table, so I think we had a visual. But if we ever, like, got out of hand and she couldn't rein us back in, or if we were speaking out of character without indicating that we were out of character, she would roll on this table. I was a child who had untreated ADHD. My character fell out of a window and broke both her legs at one point.
No! Oh my gosh.
We still had a great time. And also, imagine this was a group of 11-year-olds playing. So one of my friends, and I think I have mentioned this before, but I will always remember it in retrospect very fondly. One of my friends who was playing a human ranger, and she was obsessed with Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, looked at us dead in the fucking face. Oh, am I allowed to say fucking on this podcast?
Yeah.
I think so. Dead in the fucking face and said, "You're all playing one-dimensional characters. I'm the only interesting one." And I was like, "You're playing a human ranger. And you're really into Lord of the Rings."
No.
But we were 11-year-olds. We were 11-year-olds, so this wasn't like, I almost feel like, and maybe this is my anxiety talking, but I almost feel like if you were like, if this happened now, someone would be genuinely upset. But we were 11-year-olds in the very early 2000s, so everyone just kind of had a laugh and moved on.
I think, like, when you're younger, you can, like, rubber band really quick.
Yeah.
Like, you can just go, like, so-and-so did this. And they're like, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay.
Boom,
are they being a bit mean?
Yeah,
fine. And, like, I think whilst you're experimenting with the rule set, it sounded like that was a template for you to explore these stories that you probably would have made pretend anyway. Maybe less
absolutely.
of the breaking limbs, but I'm not going to speak for them.
I mean, I can picture me on, like, a little, those little wagons with the red...
Yes.
I could picture them pulling me around the garden in a little wagon being like, "You've broken your legs. We've got to put you on the wagon."
Okay, that's very cute. Yeah. That's very cute.
But yeah, it was. I feel like so I don't want to get too much into this because I really genuinely am only in like season 3. I missed the bandwagon on Stranger Things, right?
Mhm.
But the one time you actually see them play D&D in like the first episode, um
Yeah.
it they did a good job of making that realistic.
It
They
did
did a
feel
great
very
job.
it did feel very genuine and very kind of I don't know what the very organic that the kids would be like, no, that's stupid. Like there's like
Right.
oh well that just happens. It's like no. And then people just feeling a very visceral reaction. I think when you're playing in a pretend space as a kid and and it's hard for you to view this from other perspectives, you're just like this is how everything is. And then when someone does something either dissenting or in a different vein, you're like no. I find it very impressive that you had an
Flips the
out of
table.
character visual cue of hand on head.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It
So did
was. I wonder
so
how much of this was advised to her by her father. I have to, or how much of it came just naturally to her, or what? Because I can't imagine. Like, I imagine there were times that she went to her dad. She was like, "Dad, they won't shut up. I'm trying to tell them my story," and he was like, "Well, why don't you incorporate a visual cue?" Like, I'm
yeah.
guessing. I have no idea, but you have to wonder like what ideas, or like why don't you see if they're interested in like a punishment table? You know, like,
Excellent. Right.
yes,
Snakes for
you
eyes.
fall out of the
Kneecaps
window
melt. Yeah.
and break both of your legs.
Oh my gosh.
And I have nothing but fond memories from that time.
Yeah.
I really, and that's what got me started. And subsequently, it's interesting because I had a group of guy friends as well,
Mm.
and they subsequently got into it like at the same time. I don't think it was from me. I think it just happened. But because I was, good friends with these lads and everything, we then ended up playing. As time went on. So I played all through. I went to high school in America. I played all through high school. I played.
You got the primo American
I
experience there.
did. I did. The lockers were a little thin, so it was very difficult to be shoved in one. But I got almost everything else.
Excellent. I'm really glad that you managed to get that full round
Mm-hmm.
move cinema-esque experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I basically am the kids from Stranger Things.
Just saying. Look,
just
the Duffer
just
brothers owe me money.
a slight flex. It's just a flex.
Just
I'm also telepathic. Um,
just saying.
but
Oh,
no, it
God.
was so when people are like, when did you get into it? So, and then LARP is interesting because when I was about 16 years old, I
Hmm.
was on the internet lying about being 18 and
As we all were. I was a
making
doctor, yes.
making lots of friends whilst lying about being 18. Now, to be fair, folks, it was a different time. And
Very different.
in addition to that, I want to say that my motivation for that was, even at the time, to give those friends plausible deniability. We occasionally wrote mature topics, and I did not want to be excluded from those mature topics because this was like I was on roleplay forums and stuff, right?
Oh
And
shit, yeah.
so I was suddenly born in 1986, and which I only had to up it a little bit, but I was the year of the rabbit. I remember that.
Very
Um,
good. You
I
need to
have
lock
some,
those things away.
yeah, I have some very niche
Memories from that time.
memories. Yes, but I wanted to write those things, but I knew even just from I didn't understand the implications. Right? Okay, I was 16, but
Yeah.
I knew that I shouldn't necessarily be approaching writing these mature topics with adults if I wasn't an adult. But I was
Mm.
also pretty close to being an adult, and so I was like, well, I'm going to tell everyone I'm 18 so that one, so I can, but also so that they're not
Yeah.
dealing
They're not.
with
Yes.
knowing that they're writing things with a minor.
Mm.
So Not okay, guys. Don't do it nowadays, but it was a different time, okay?
I distinctly remember being on those kind of forums, or like even talking to, and when you're a kid, you're like, people will just go like, oh, you're a kid, you can't do this, and then it's pushing you out of a space where you're like, I want to create some fiction, I want to engage in some role play type stuff. And then as soon as you're like, you're a kid, it's either like shoved off to a kid's table. Like, no, I'm ready to deal with mature topics. And they
Right.
don't know I'm not a doctor from Guatemala. They don't know that I remember when films were in black and white. Like, you know.
Exactly. So yeah, no, that was the vibe. And so there's a point to the story. I almost got into LARP when I was 16.
Ooh.
They were all going to a fantasy LARP in the area where you camp for the weekend.
Mm.
And I was like, this is pretty cool. I talked to my parents about it. They would have been okay with it. Then the hammer came down. You had to be 18 to go to this LARP. Listeners, I was 16 years old. I had been lying about being 18 for a year.
Ooh.
I made a lot of excuses.
I have taxes to do that weekend.
I really need to go do my taxes. I'm sorry. And it was like, oh yeah, we just have to get your license. Oh, I haven't learned to drive yet.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have a license.
You should have had that for at least a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do have friends that legitimately didn't learn to drive. So on and so forth. So, you know, it was...
Yeah.
I guess it was believable, but I was presented with a conundrum at the, you know, not fully developed frontal temporal lobe stage of 16 years old of, do I just come clean and tell these people that they have been role-playing inappropriate material with a minor, or do I figure out how to gracefully exit from this situation, which is, I don't know how graceful it was because I was 16, but that is what I tried to do. And that was my first almost LARP at 16 years old.
I think that is a meta LARP, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, okay, and I'm...
None of the other players knew, but...
Lying on the internet isn't good, okay?
No.
But, I mean, this was the same time where I was telling people that I had a twin brother because I wanted to be received on the internet as a male. So there was a lot of gender and self-exploration happening at this point.
These clues will be useful later.
Yep. And I was confronted with something very difficult at that age, where my girlfriend at the time, because I have been pansexual for an incredibly long time, my friends, but my girlfriend at the time was getting annoyed that someone thought I was a guy, so she went online and told everyone that I was lying. And yep. And this was a very interesting. I was not a well-practiced liar because on my day-to-day, I've always been a pretty blunt person, and I don't like lying. I'm not good at it. I don't believe that it's, I feel like there's a time and place, I am sure, but on the day-to-day, I try to tell as few as I can. But I was telling these massive lies to people on the internet about who I actually was. And at the time, I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why I was trying to masquerade as a dude on the internet. It wasn't for the reasons that a lot of people do, where in that and a subsequent era, if you were in a gaming space, especially video games, as someone assigned female at birth, it could have the potential to be very uncomfortable for you. So I understand, that happened often. But for me, it was in these other spaces like roleplay forums and things like that, where I was just, and from her perspective, I was just telling people I was a guy because. And it felt like this massive betrayal to me in a way that I didn't understand at the time. Because I actually did not know until I was about 19. I did not know what transgender was.
No.
I actually didn't know you could be gay until I was in 8th grade, and my friend told me that she had a crush on our other friend, and then I realized I had a crush on her, but then I set the two of them up because I wanted them to be happy.
Oh.
I was a weird kid. But there were just like social concepts that somehow completely missed me until somebody looked me in the face and said, "This is a thing."
I think this is definitely this is definitely a topic that's been broached a lot of times, and I've seen a lot of people saying it. When people say representation matters, when you can see a fully formed concept of a thing and go, "Oh, I've been feeling adjacent to that or that exact thing. Am I this?"
Yes, yeah. And I think, and I we won't get too much into that because I think this is going to come up a lot in our next episode. But the moral of that particularly dragged on story is that representation, my friends, does indeed matter. And kids do experiment with who they are, and that's a natural part of being a child. And so to bring that back around to tabletop, it's very interesting because I played, and again, we'll talk about this more, I think, next episode, but I played primarily female characters at first because it did not occur to me that I could do anything else. But then I think I played my first male character at a tabletop when I was about 19. So about the same year that someone told me, hey, being transgender is a thing.
Hey, would you look at that?
What do you know? I mean, and growing up in high school, people would always say to me, you're a gay man trapped in a woman's body. And I never pushed against that or said anything negative. I would go, honey, I'm a bi man trapped in a woman's body. And if that doesn't describe like who I was in the pre-2010s, before we had a lot of language and representation to understand identity, I don't know what would. And so I guess I can say, at least starting at 11, I grew up playing tabletop. And I almost LARPed if it weren't for the nasty matter of my internet deception.
Blast. Internet deception. Could have got away with it too if it wasn't an ID check.
Yep. and I mean, even back then, that is why those things exist at LARPs, folks. It is to protect children. So it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
At 16, I wasn't even mad at them for having ID checks. I was just like, oh, fuck.
Oh yeah, when you're a kid, you're just there like, rules are rules and they're immutable and they're there for reasons. I'll not check it further, but I'm fucked. Yep.
And so 16-year-old CJ was like, shit.
So obviously that was your first interception point with LARP, and kind of like as an extension of online forum RP. When was the next point you got back into it? Was it after cosplay or during that era? Because I know a lot of cosplay and LARP communities overlap to a massive degree.
It was after, but I had a median or a middleman that I'm not ashamed to admit, because screw it. Like we're we drastically underserve ourselves in the matters of creativity as adults. All of my friends and I believe for the most part I was the one that pushed this, and my friends had a great time, but it took somebody saying, hey, let's do this. In that my friends and I would all LARP, we would all cosplay from the same series or whatever, and at one point I went, not in a public space, I think we were all a little too self-conscious to do that, but I went, what if we played as our characters for a while? That could be fun. And so my friends and I as cosplayers would, and sometimes we wouldn't even get into costume, but in private settings, we I know some people actually do kind of do this in like at conventions, but I do know that can raise some other issues, like, interacting with people who are not part of the scene, that scene. But in private, in our hotel rooms or at our houses or whatever we were doing at the time,
for a couple hours sometimes. We'd just be like, okay, let's be these characters. And we would just play out scenarios as if we were those characters. And it was sort of almost a precursor to LARP, to Nordic LARP specifically, without me really realizing that. It was just me being a young adult that still wanted to play pretend, but not having the setup for that or the knowledge that it existed in the way it did, even though I knew about that LARP, right? But it was very much the sort of LARP where, I mean, I looked into all the rules and everything. It looked really cool, but this was the sort of LARP where, you know, if you're a magic user, you've got 10 beanbags in a pouch, and if you hit someone with the beanbag, the spell is hit, you know? And it was very much, especially at that point, what a lot of LARP was at that point, which was definitely roleplay, definitely fun, but also very mechanic heavy and structured.
Yes.
And it wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for, I need a creative outlet. I want to be a different character. And a lot of my other friends really loved doing that. And some of these other friends, you know, to translate from a roleplay forum, I roleplayed a lot of original fiction at first, but I got into roleplay forums based on fandoms eventually. And a lot of these friends, we'd get together at conventions and cosplay the characters we roleplayed on forums. So it was just a natural extension of things we were already doing. And, you know, at the time, some of us, like, felt at least subconscious enough that, like, we were like, we'll keep it between our friend group, you know, that we're 20-year-olds that play pretend.
Yeah.
But we had a great time. And then I didn't have that for a while. I continued to write both. For a while, I'd write fan fiction. I'd write from series. And then from there, I kind of moved more onto original stuff. And I still write original stuff, or I'll write continuations of things that happen at LARP with people, because, you know, maybe we had a story we didn't get to tell, or we want to see a resolution for those characters. So I definitely still do that. But actual LARP actually came much later for me.
Wow.
And some of that was because my my impression of LARP was that mechanics heavy, running around in a field smacking each other with foam swords. That I was like, oh, I'm kind of interested in it, but you know. And I was the worst. I always had a but at least I don't blank. Before I started reading comics, I was but at least I don't read comics, and then I started reading comics, and but at least I'm not a LARPer.
Yeah,
now I'm all of these things.
I think because, like, it kind of geekery and nerdery was so reviled, especially when we were younger. And I know it's like, A, it wasn't like that bad if we actually explored that, and B, now it is the mainstay of popular culture. I mean, for goodness sake, we've got superhero movies all the time. And there are more LARP movies than I can actually name off the top of my head now. But for a really long time, it's that gif of a guy shouting lightning bolt, throwing a beanbag, and that is what LARP is specifically. Right. And then you're there like, I'm not doing that. So what am I doing? It's outside of that space. Is it between cosplay? And I know a lot of people both love and hate role models, because they're like, oh, these people are actually at LARP. They're fine. Like, they're having a good time. They're a bit weird, but that's fine. The amount of people that I LARP with are like, yeah, that's literally how I started. That and watching the web series LARPs, which is very mechanics heavy, but also has emotional subplots. And you're like, oh, and then you can move across to this. And then, like,
Absolutely.
you see stuff online where you're like, oh, so this is this. And then I think what's been really good about a kind of like the sphere of kind of creative role play is that we've kind of got to the point where all of these spheres touch now.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, definitely. There's a Venn diagram, and there's definitely overlap.
Yeah, and I think I think you quite rightly point that you basically go, well, I'm in this sphere, but at least I don't do that.
Right. And I think that's less now. Maybe it isn't, maybe it is, but it feels like it's less now. But at the time, you were trying to figure out how to justify your nerdy interests to people.
Yeah.
When it is looked down as like, you freaking dweeb. Like, you know.
I think it got to me, like, I was there like, okay, I do this, but I don't do that. And I always wanted to LARP. And then I found myself LARPing, and then I found myself like my first LARP character was he's a one-eyed pirate who's like wearing kind of like I started at Empire. No, I started at Fallen Heroes based on a character that I was making for Empire. And I found myself as a one-eyed orphaned pirate who couldn't read because I didn't know that much about the lore, and I was wearing like I was literally wearing my mother's curtains. Like I know it's always said in like the community. I know it's always said in the community, like, oh, you know, so and so's wearing their mother's curtains, and I'm like, no, I literally tore 2 curtains apart, or what the inner bit as a base layer and the upper bit as like a sash, and I just went to town. And then I was like, actually, if this is, you know, the most weird that we're at, I'm comfortable. Like,
Right.
this is fun. Like, you know,
This is
I've done
fun, yeah.
A, this is fun. B, I haven't died. You know, when you're always there, like, at least I haven't done that. If I did that, presumably the ground would open up and destroy me.
Swallow me whole. Yep.
But I didn't die. I didn't spontaneously catch on fire, and I didn't get castigated from society and thrown onto an island.
Right. And you know, nobody is messaging you on AOL Instant Messenger telling you that they're gonna meet you outside the back of the school and beat you up because you're such a dweeb. Like, that's not happening because you're 20 fucking 5. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's I am personally really, really happy in 99% of the ways that this has become mainstream, become more accessible to people. I'm not the sort of person that's like, well, I suffered and now you're just enjoying it. What's wrong? What? How dare you enjoy this?
Yeah.
No, this is great. This is awesome. Also, like, you know, but it is interesting for people who've come after us who've never had to experience that. I'm so happy for them.
Yeah.
But it's so different.
It is wild because I know, like, I know, especially Empire. I've only joined it for the last 5 years, but I've definitely seen it become, you know, uber popular. And then the more people that have joined that are outside that sphere that have come in and brought new things, people who were really good at making costuming, who were in it from the start, but then people who were just into costumes and then they went, oh, you should go to this LARP, have enhanced the setting. People who are like circus performers who bring in their performance skills, people who are outside of that community bringing more in. And then when you stand in the middle of this town and go, this is a real organic town where I can spend the fake money on, I can go to a puppet play, I can eat, I can drink, I can sleep, someone could read my fortune, someone can give me a back massage, I can go off to war, I can do magic. Like, all these people
so
bring in
cool.
these. It's so cool. And you're there like, why didn't I let myself do this?
Right? And yeah, and for me, it is very much like I kept having these close encounters or like half encounters, like, you know, oh, you know, you're at a convention and you're doing a thing and it's kind of a LARP, but it's kind of, you know, those sorts of things. I had a lot of these half encounters going on. And it wasn't until I got into blockbuster LARPs that I just fell head first. And yeah, so that would be 5 or 6 years ago. Was when I was introduced to I was at Gen Con, and I was introduced to the blockbuster LARP The Night in Question, which is a splatterpunk horror Vampire the Masquerade blockbuster LARP. And it's set in the 90s. It's supposed to be very kitschy. It's supposed to be, you're going to this underground rave in Texas, but what it actually ends up being is it's a mass turning for the Sabbat to create an army to fight against the Camarilla. So it's
Gosh.
Yeah, it's the brainchild of Jackalope Studios, LARP Studios. Really awesome folks. I was just walking around the dealer's room and they were set up right next to, I believe, right next to the Vampire the Masquerade table, and I'd gone to the Vampire the Masquerade panel. It was something I was interested in, other than D&D and a few other things. And I walked by and they're like, hey, we're doing a LARP in Texas. And I'm like, tell me a little bit about it. And they did, and handed me the stuff. And I went back back home with my ex at the time, and I was like, I've always kind of wanted to try something like this. Can we do it? And they were like, yes. They changed their mind later and decided they didn't want to. At the time, I already had 2 tickets. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go anyway, and I'm going to see if my friend wants to go. My friend, one of my besties, my friend Ty, and I flew out to Texas, did this nutty one-night vampire LARP. I was a vampire. And they started as a human, obviously, and everyone ends up a vampire at that LARP. There's only one survivor. Every year there's only one survivor.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And we had a freaking blast. We immediately came back. We signed up for the next year of that. We signed up for Convention of Thorns, which I had always wanted to be a part of. Then like a month or 2 later, subsequently, I signed myself and my ex up for College of Wizardry. My ex once again decided they did not want to go about a month beforehand. So I brought a friend. I said, okay, we've been through this. I'm going anyway. I brought a friend, and that's how I got involved in College of Wizardry as well. So that all happened in the span of a year about 6 years ago.
Wow, that's incredible.
I just went, screw it, and started going to Blockbuster LARPs. And from there, it kind of grew, and I started trying new things and meeting people in the community who would recommend new things to me. But my TTRPG experience is upward of 20 years. But my LARP experience is 6. And I'm having a great time. And what's wild to me, and probably it has to do with the TTRPG experience and also subsequent other writing, copywriting, fiction writing, and social media experience and so on. But I've actually now worked for more LARPs than I have TTRPGs in the span of 6 years. So
wow.
it kind of, I got very swept away, especially as I'd stopped cosplaying as much. I had all this time and money that I used to spend on cosplay that I wasn't doing anything with. And the idea that I could dress up and do all these things I got to do as a cosplayer, but also play pretend at the same time, was just infinitely appealing to me.
I can definitely foresee like because the cosplay is the kind of the edifice of like, I am this person, and then I can definitely see you going, I could be this, but with other people buying into this specific thing.
Yes.
Like, it's not just people going, love your cosplay, thank you so much, and you're going, oh great. It's people going, I need you to come with me and defeat the monster. And you're like, fuck yes.
And it's a character you've created on yourself, which for some people is more exciting, some people's more intimidating. But for me, this idea that I'm creating a part of this story myself, and then I'm collaborating with all of these other people to create this story, it was like 20-year-old CJ in the hotel room pretending to be Fujisaki Suguru from Gravitation, all over again. But better. And so that's my journey.
You know what I find fascinating is that every single one of those like little bits is another morsel of story that I'm like, CJ, we literally have to talk about this for another hour. And you're just like, and then that happened. Anyway, so what I did was I'm like, oh my God.
I'm sorry, you just dropped that really casually. That's my whole like modus operandi as a person, Sam, is I'm just gonna really casually drop a bombshell and move on.
You're just Doctor Whoing your way through like, yeah, no, I spent some time on Modus 4. Yeah. Anyway. I think I want to go back to the start of the conversation, which is like you like talking with you and like interacting with you at Second Breakfast, and then our follow-up discussions. I was like, I have to get CJ to get in on this project, and I'm so glad I did. Oh my gosh,
I'm having a great time. Honestly,
you're having a great time. I'm having an amazing time. I'm like, this is story time. Yes, perfect. I unless you've got anything particular, I think that's a wonderful point for us to.
Oh yes, I have had I've had an entire episode where I've gotten to talk about myself. I'm good. Thanks for letting me get that out, Sam.
Yeah, no problem. It was weird that you called me at 3 a.m. to do this, but yeah, that's fine.
I woke up I actually did wake up in the middle of the night for no perceivable reason except for the fact that I'd forgotten to take my contacts out. But I just rang you and I was like, I really just need to talk about myself today. For
Sam,
the record,
crank up
listeners.
the podcast machine. It's my time to shine.
I really need to talk about my my obsession with anime when I was 11 years old. Okay.
I always find it very fascinating to understand how people are approaching things and their backstory, and I think that's really important for people who are listening to the podcast. Hello, listener. I'm talking directly to you now. For people to understand what our backgrounds are and how we're approaching things, and maybe if you see yourself in what we're saying, then you understand the context around it.
I'll also just briefly drop, just because this adds another layer, that I was a theater kid. So of course
we didn't even touch on that. And
that's okay. My journey could have taken place absent of theater, I think, but I do think that being a theater kid and then professionally doing theater for a little while, has given me different tools to use and also pushed me even more to seek creative outlets when I wasn't working in theater anymore. So, it had a hand. I think I still would be where I am today without theater, as in regards to TTRPG and roleplay. Although maybe there, I could take a whole nother, and I won't right now. I could take a whole nother hour talking about acting, schools of acting and acting methods. And I would be lying if I said I don't ever think about that when I'm doing live performances or streaming or LARPing. But, so those of you who are maybe former theater kids, that's something to think about. But I will also say that you don't have to be interested in those things. So, it's a completely, another possible avenue of discussion in the future is just, the greats.
Oh, I've written it down. Yeah, we are going to drill into that one.
Yep, we're going to have the Respect for Acting Udahagen Masterclass in 1 month.
I will say Brechtian, and I might understand what I'm talking about.
I'll talk more about it if we do ever get on that subject. Good. But there are really good things in between. I've completely disassociated myself from this character and what you picture to be method acting. There are a lot of really good schools of thought in between that. And why not? Let's apply acting theory to LARP and TTRPGs, guys. Let's do it. But yeah, thank you so much for just coming on and posing a couple questions and letting me go ham today. It was so much fun.
This is an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, CJ. Thank you for listening to our show. At the Table has been a Project Headphones production. You can see more of our work over at projectheadphones.com. To support this show, please head over to Patreon/@thetablepod. To get in contact with the show, please email atthetable@projectheadphones.com. Please remember to rate, review, and share amongst your friends. Telling other people that we're here and the stuff we do is the best way we can get our show out there, so please do so. Our music was Captain Scurvy and Space Jazz by Kevin MacLeod in Computech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attributions 4 license. Thank you very much for being patient with us. I know this is a bit of a different episode. We've had Jess off ill, and then we've had some tech issues. So thank you so much for bearing with and being patient. We managed to, I know we've had the tech issues, but we actually recorded 2 podcasts this week. So that's the other delay, is that I had double the amount of stuff to do. We had another phenomenal interview, which is coming up. This will be the next one. So we're storing the interview until we've got our next podcast date. And then we'll pop an interview with Super Dylan, where we're going to talk about gender. It was amazing. We had a really great time. I can't wait for you to hear about it. These little bonus episodes, I'm hoping we can do a few more. Some of them will be behind the paywall at the Patreon already mentioned. Some of them will be on the free feed. So we're just going to mix it up. Yeah, I always find it interesting how people access these spaces, like I just said before. So yeah, we're going to do a few more of those. You know, obviously Jess and I haven't talked much about how we got into it, but also other people that are in the space talking about how they got into it or how they're related to it is one of my favorite things. Okay, I'll stop rambling now. Thank you very much for listening. See you next time.